Yes, my people, welcome back to another episode of Navvai Shift. This is a show where we talk to leaders at the edge of finance, technology, and AI to understand how they're reshaping the future of business. Today, we make a sense of conversational AI in 2025. Our guest is Adam Fenwick, VP of Global Alliance of Boost AI, one of the leading platforms powering enterprise-grade conversational AI. So Adam spends his time working with partners and enterprises worldwide, helping them cut through the noise, avoid the hype, and deploy AI in ways that are scalable, trustworthy, and generally useful. Adam, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good, thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys.
Our pleasure for sure. But Adam, I want to kind of start off with your journey. Like, what path kind of led you to technology, and why specifically conversational AI?
Yeah, good question. I think roughly probably cut my career in two. So I did about 12 years in IT consulting, largely for kind of small boutique firms. Last one I worked for was a company called Objectivity that was acquired by Accenture now. So kind of specialized in kind of all things IT transformation, CIO advisory, that sort of stuff. And then I got very lucky, is the truth. I had a colleague in that industry who was one of the pioneers in automation software, in RPA software. And they made me cross over into the software side of the house, and just got really lucky to catch that wave of emerging automation software categories, RPA being the big one. So it was kind of there for the beginning of that and saw all of that surge. And of course, helping customers automate. I also worked for a big German company you're probably familiar with called Celonis, also kind of in that automation area. So I've always been kind of adjacent to AI, and kind of trying to solve some of the same problems. And then second stroke of luck was a colleague of mine at Celonis, Nick Mitchell, who's now my boss. He's the CRO at Boost, who's just a fantastic guy. When he asked me to come over to Boost, that was a really easy decision to make. And here I am.
Nice. I know you mentioned the word luck. I feel like you've positioned yourself in a place where you were fortunate enough to get some of the positions because of who you know. And of course, again, I feel like that does come from like an element of skill as well. So I mean, I feel like you're being a little humble, but there's nothing wrong with that. But so you're now VP of Global Alliance at Boost AI. What does the day-to-day look like?
Yeah, thank you. It's I mean, on one hand, guys, it's actually really, really simple, right? There's probably two activities that take up most of my day to day. One, shock horror, is talking to partners all day long, right? And I always say to my team is, partners get a vote, right? Every single day. They have lots of options of who to talk to, who to do business with, who to prioritize, especially in AI, which is like no other software market we've seen. So there's a daily demand to go back to those partners, even the ones you know well, and earn their trust repeatedly over and over again, and that's what your competitors are doing. So that's a huge part of the week. The other part, I mean, if I have a spare minute, I always try and spend time with my team, right? We're asking them to do difficult stuff, right? Go and engage sometimes some of the biggest consulting firms in the world, earn their trust, be prioritized in multiple markets, et cetera, right? And we're competing against some of the biggest software companies in the world. That's not easy. So no matter how experienced you are, so if I have a spare minute, I'd always prefer to spend time with my people, right, with the team. So those are the two big day-to-day activities, and it's just I think a constant balancing and assessing of where are you with those relationships, how high is the trust. Are you being prioritized by them in the way that the business would like to be? And then if you're not, what can you do about it? What can you do to influence them and inspire them and and collaborate with them, right? It's about making money. It's about doing business together. So I think maybe the other thing I would say is being really, really commercially sensitive to those partners' needs is a big part of what I'm thinking about every day, right? I always say I try and be a bit different. I try and run the partner team like a sales team, maybe not the most popular opinion. And I try and encourage my team to be very, very commercially minded, right? Like I think if you really understand partners, you have to understand what they're there to do, how they make their money. And sometimes inside your own organization, I've got no qualms about saying this, you're having to advocate for their point of view, sometimes against your colleagues, right? You have to stand up for them inside your business and really try and put their perspective on the table. And it's not the only game in town, but businesses like us don't scale without partners. That's a fact. So if you don't represent their interests strongly, in leadership groups and in key meetings inside your company, you're not you're not doing everything you could be to progress those relationships. But I hope that comes across in the right way. It's a daily discipline, right? You're never exactly where you want to be, and you're constantly fighting against the competition, and just passage of time means you have to keep re-earning that trust all the time.
Yeah, nice. And who are the kind of partners that you spend the most time with?
Oh, yes, that is a great question. Well, I mean, I could have given you a very clean answer in previous roles. The problem with AI is it's kind of everyone. But if I try and break it down, there's probably three buckets, I would say. You've obviously got the ultra massive, big, famous global system integrators, the Deloittes, the Accentures of the world, right? They are, inescapable juggernauts, and they have ginormous AI practices with some of the best experts in the world. So they're a tough brief for a small company like us, very resource hungry. We have to work incredibly hard to service them, keep them in the way they like to be kept, if you like, but super important, right? And can be amazingly impactful. If I'm being a little biased for a moment, my personal favorite would be group number 2, which is kind of more mid-sized consulting houses. If I give you an example of someone like Cyclum, originally headquartered out of Ukraine, or Spirasoft in Poland, or people like this, maybe in the kind of 5 to 20,000 people sort of size firms. You find a lot of the same things that you find in the real big boys, like great AI practices, great expertise, fantastic people. They're that little bit more manageable day to day for a small team in a small company. And you just find some of the most impressive people you'll ever find in AI working in those types of teams. So that feels really, really good. And then, of course, there's lots and lots of highly specialized boutique firms. And obviously, you guys will be more than familiar with this, where I think particularly with AI, you get some organizations where they'll specialize by a region, an industry, a department, with something really specific down to use case level. Might be a small company, 2 to 10 people, but they're world leading experts in that field, and you can't really cover all the ground in AI without building relationships with those people, as well as the big famous partners. So those are the 3 main kinds. So I guess big, medium, small is another way of putting it.
Nice. And what, in terms of like the collaborations with all 3, right? What, or maybe your favorite one out of those, which is the medium size, what do those collaborations usually focus on?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it comes in a few different flavors, right? Sometimes they're bringing an opportunity to our table from their customer base. Sometimes it's the reverse. We're bringing something to them. And of course, the engagement with the customer can be different, right? Sometimes the customer is already, quite along in their thinking. Maybe they've done some AI stuff before. Maybe they've got like an old chat bot that's showing its age and they want to replace it. And it's pretty straightforward kind of sales, co-sell collaboration, right? Other times the client might be at an earlier stage, so it's more of an advisory type engagement. So we're more talking art of the possible. How can Boost plus that partner show a vision for AI, let's say over the next 2 years or whatever it might be? And what does that journey look like? So we're still co-selling and co-presenting, but there's more of a design element to it, I think. So again, back to my earlier point, I try and be really, really salesy in those situations, which is, if a partner, particularly if they bring an opportunity, a lead to you, the least you can do is be really, really animated from a sales point of view, right? Be really on it, be really quick, be really responsive, and really sensitive to the fact that there's a commercial opportunity there, right? And start there. So, we collaborate in lots of other ways as well, as you might imagine, marketing and thought leadership and all this kind of thing. We've been attending events this week, for example, for some of those very same partners I've mentioned. So there's always something going on in that event space, thought leadership space, or even, online on LinkedIn or something. So there's loads of stuff that wraps around that relationship that's collaborative, but fundamentally it's about working deals together, winning together, and then trying to turn that into a habit, right? Just like a sports team, and then it kind of spirals from there.
Yeah. 100%. That's why I think collaboration is so important as well, because when you can collaborate with other parties, you can get to the end result much more quicker. And I always say speed kills deals. So it's amazing.
With you 100%. I mean, there was just on that point, there was I don't know if you saw it a couple of weeks ago, there was a really good MIT report came out about AI and did the rounds and was, really impressive, as you'd expect from MIT's lab. And what was really pleasing to read in there was there's loads of stuff that you'd expect to find in there. 95% of Gen AI projects fail, and all the usual stuff that you see in the public domain. There was a point about partnerships in there, though, which was, where you see successes in AI projects, in proper enterprises at scale, all the things that you want, that people say they want, that rarely happens without collaboration with partners. It's extremely rare that's just a vendor to a customer, or indeed a partner to a customer. It's usually some kind of collaboration between different types of organizations to pull it off. So it's really nice to see that starting to show in the statistics, not just my point of view, your point of view, right? It's nice to show there's actually hard data emerging that says that's the way to go.
100%. When the data presents itself, who are we to say they're wrong?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to ask, Adam, how does your background kind of shape the way you look at the fast-paced changing space that we're actually in?
Yeah, gosh, it's fast is definitely the word, right? I mean, I think about this all the time, right? How is the market evolving? And I saw it with automation, right? I saw the software go from completely unknown to kind of supernova in 4 or 5 years, and AI and conversational AI is on a similar trajectory, right? I mean, we all know that if we take something simple like chatbots, right? If you think about what they were like in 2014 to 2018, they weren't very good, right? They existed, they're on websites, but they were very frustrating, and every other thing you typed in was, I don't understand what you said, right? And look at where we are today, right? And we've obviously seen the advent of ChatGPT and LLMs and all the rest of it. So I think we very quickly got to a place where this technology was familiar, and now it's become, I think, more potent than people even realize, right? I mean, you're now in a position where, if you were so inclined as a brand, you could have a conversational AI platform online, digitally, as the front door to your whole brand, right? Wherever it exists, website, app, WhatsApp, digital phone calls, you name it, right? You could have a conversational platform that's now capable of meeting your customers as a brand, wherever they are, any device, any time zone, any language, and it's more capable than it's ever been at understanding what people are asking, right? And what is the nature of the inquiry? And then if you understand what the customer needs, you can prescribe the solution, right? Maybe you can just deal with it then and there. That's ideal, right? You just automate it and deal with whatever the issue is, or answer the question. Maybe you do still need to route it to a person, to get to the right outcome, depending on, it could be a very vulnerable customer, for example, or an extremely valuable VIP customer. And you might say, I definitely want a person to talk to that, or whatever the appropriate step in the journey is. But we're there now, right? So we've gone from pretty crummy chatbots that were well-intentioned but didn't really live up to the promise. And I think most people, if I ask my parents, have you dealt with a chatbot or a voice bot before? They'll be like, yeah, but it was awful. Fast forward to today, that's no longer the norm, right? There's real possibilities here to affect real change in brands, and when you see that happening with our customers, for example, it's incredibly exciting.
100%. It's definitely exciting for sure, and I think this sets the stage quite nicely for us to kind of touch on the technology itself and how it's actually evolved. So I'm going to ask, so over the last few years, I know you kind of mentioned of how outdated the old chatbots used to be, but what's your definition of conversational AI, and how would you describe the market today?
Oh man, that is a big one, right? It's it's a really noisy marketplace. The terminology changes all the time, and even though I guess I'm an insider at the moment, I still find it hard to keep up with it, right? So I think conversational AI is simply harnessing a mixture of technologies to enable fantastic conversations between brands and their customers, right? So I think sometimes the terminology gets in the way, right? You've got your sort of more machine learning driven NLU type stuff that people have been familiar with for years. I think some people forget that's still AI. It is, right? And then you've got your super whizzy, ultra, LLM, GPT-5 powered, or Anthropic or Gemini, whatever you like. And of course, that's also highly conversational and chatty and playful. And there's loads of other stuff that underpins that, really. So I don't see conversational AI as it's only this type of technology. It's actually a collection of complementary technologies that are serving a single purpose, right? And we can come up with a really elaborate definition, but fundamentally, what are you trying to do, right? You're trying to insert that technology, those kinds of platforms, into the moment when a customer contacts a brand via whatever channel. Voice is probably the most high profile at the moment because it demos very well. It's exciting. It's sexy to people. Chatbots are seen as maybe a bit more table stakes these days. But whatever channel, right? Could be SMS, could be WhatsApp, could even be email, right? Even though that's not a popular point of view. It's about how do you meet a customer? Where do you meet them? Can you understand what they need? And can you give them what they need, right? And the technology is designed to help with that, right? So it's I think sometimes people get tied up in, we'll probably talk about agentic and things like that later, right? It's sort of people get hung up on the terminology and the definitions of some of that. But I think ultimately it's about helping companies have great conversations with their customers, and that is not as easy as anyone thinks it is. Shock horror, right? There's a lot that goes into that. So I tend to focus on the customer and their needs for their customers, right? And whatever combination of technology, and I'm privileged to work for a company in Boost that has a combination of those technologies under the hood, that can prescribe solutions. We're not the only provider that can do that, but I think it's much more important these days to focus on the customer and the outcomes, not on the particular type of technology that's doing the thing. The stuff's getting better all the time, right? And we can get into some of the details of the latest, greatest if you're interested. But it's, the one thing that's certain is investment in AI, R&D, the progression of this stuff continues at a rapid pace. It gets better all the time. And I can barely keep up with our own internal developments, never mind anything else. So that's a given, right? The interesting part is, what are you going to do with it? How can you help that brand change the experience their customers are having, which may be bad today, right? We've all rung a call center and had a terrible experience. That's where my brain goes initially is, well, let's change that then.
Nice.
That kind of makes sense?
That makes sense. I'm
not dodging the question entirely on the definition. So.
No, you smashed it. You smashed it. On the topic of conversational AI, what industries are adopting conversational AI right now? Well, the fastest at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a data-driven answer for you there. I mean, certainly from the perspective of Boost, our strengths very much reside in regulated industries. So we certainly see rapid adoption there. So if you think of any business that has a highly regulatory, high compliance environment, obviously banking, insurance, healthcare, telco, and government, those are the obvious examples I'd give you. That said, you've got things like the European AI Act, which kind of means everybody's in a reasonably high compliance environment now. There's only going to be more regulation on AI, I think, moving forward. So if you're an online retailer, okay, that's different from being an investment bank, but that doesn't mean you don't care about regulatory stuff and data protection and all that kind of thing and GDPR. So I think generally there's a universal interest in AI. I think it's maybe, I might even go as far as to say, might be the first software category, certainly I've ever seen, where you can almost guarantee there's 100% propensity to buy. That doesn't mean everyone knows what they want to buy and what they want to do with it, but there's not really any barrier there in any industry I've found. Maybe banks are picking it up slightly faster than manufacturers are, for example, or I don't know, public sector can sometimes be a little bit slower than the private sector or what have you. But my general sense is everybody's interested. It then comes down to interested in what use cases, great AIs, caught your attention, but what are we actually going to do with it that's going to make a difference? And is AI even the right solution? Is conversational AI the right prescription for the solution? I think maybe it's the old automation consultant in me. Sometimes the issues a brand is facing has a lot more to do with the underlying data, where it is, the mess it's in, processes that aren't where they ought to be, and so on and so forth, right? So sometimes the sort of underlying plumbing is the barrier to really harnessing AI to do the cool stuff that you want to do, right? And that doesn't mean you shouldn't engage with conversational AI, but I think it's part of something bigger, right? I see that as it's kind of we're the sort of the tip of the spear that's going to talk to your customer. If you're going to let us do that, there's huge assumptions about the data we're going to be able to access, to even understand who we're talking to, right, on your behalf. So there's a lot of underlying issues there in big companies that can sometimes be barriers to adoption and taking things up. But the interest seems universal to me.
Oh, nice. Adam, we're going to become friends and we're going to go for a coffee so I can pick your brain a little bit more off camera. Just been out there.
Turn down coffee, that's for sure.
I say we, the team as well. But what problem do you guys see solving best, like in terms of like use cases? I know you spoke on like use cases, but yeah, what problem do you see yourself solving best?
Yeah, can I give you an example? Maybe. I mean, I'm trying to think of a really simple one.
Yeah.
Let's take a mortgage approval, right? That's a chunky life decision. So let's take a mortgage as an example, right? And maybe this shows the exciting part, but also the reality of doing this stuff, right? So let's imagine a young couple, and one of the two of them says, right, I'm going to pick up the phone and going to explore a mortgage with my bank or provider, right? Straightforward. Okay, think about how many different ways there are into that conversation. How's he or she going to initiate that conversation? Are they going to go on their phone? Are they going to go in an app? Are they going to go on the website? Are they going to try and do it via some modern, cool interface like WhatsApp? And, typically that person isn't just going to robotically say, I would like a mortgage, please, right? They want to be greeted at the front door, as it were, and spoken to and all that kind of thing. So there's a design element to just how do you greet that person and make them feel comfortable.
100%. It's that journey.
Yeah, exactly. That the beginning of that journey. And then, okay, so how do you want to get into a mortgage conversation? Do you want to only have conversational AI react when it hears that that person's interested in a mortgage? Or do you want to go a bit more on the front foot and actually try and promote mortgages? Maybe you've got, really good rates at the moment, blah, blah, blah. You're having a promotion on it. So do you want to try and add a sort of a sales, a push element to your conversational design, or do you just want to wait to be asked? So let's keep it simple. And let's say we're just going to wait to be asked. So that young person says, yeah, tell me all about your mortgages, right? Okay, that's a highly regulated financial decision. There's mandatory language that has to be spoken either by a person or by a bot or showed in writing. There's documentation. You've obviously got to authenticate that customer, and you might have to do further validation checks and blah, 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 right? So it's a really, really high compliance discussion that has to be controlled very carefully. But people are people, right? So what happens if that person halfway through going through that approval and the bot's walking you through it, that person goes, oh, I remember my dad told me I need life insurance and I need this and I need that. And they start, normal human stuff, right?
Yeah.
Can the platform, can the design handle that? Can you say, all right, we'll pause there. We'll store all of that securely. We'll go over here and have a chat to you about life insurance or car insurance or whatever it is. Yes. We'll deal with that in a different way, probably a bit more lightweight and playful. Then we'll come back to our mortgage approval and finish it off in a compliant fashion, right? And then, how does that change if a bot is talking to you versus typing at you, right? The channel matters. So, and of course, against all of that, is that provider sticking to all their regulations and not breaking the law, and is treating that customer fairly and equitably and not showing any bias and all that kind of thing, right? And that's just mortgages. So what seems like a straightforward inquiry, we could have done even simply. Imagine just changing your details, right? Change of address. That's a non-trivial matter for a bank or whoever, right? To do correctly and legally and above board. So there's so much of these use cases. The critical part is not, can the tech do it? The tech can do it better than you think it can. The critical part is, what is the experience you want that young person to have? They're not walking into your branch anymore and seeing a banner about a mortgage. They're going onto your website. They're trying to figure out what you offer. You want them to have an amazing experience. So design that. But that's very different if they're chatting to you on WhatsApp or on the mobile app of the bank than if they're phoning you, right? You've got to have different design elements, and you really need to put yourself in their shoes. They're busy. They have high expectations. They've got £1,000 phone in their pocket. They're used to using it. It's not the old days where you come in and speak to an advisor necessarily. So it's the rules have changed. And in that digital world, I think all of us are guilty as charged, right? We have really high expectations of how slick that's going to be. That's actually the bit that we spend the most time on, right? The tech can do it. The tech, you just got to integrate the stuff with the right systems. And I'm not saying that's not a lot of work and not highly skillful, but you can make a broad assumption it can be done. The rate limiting step, the game changer, is, can you design it in such a way that it, I was going to say, delights the customer. Maybe that's hyperbolic for having a mortgage approved or not, but can that be a good experience, right? Because that's your brand on the chopping block, right? That's, if that's an awful experience or a clunky experience, you're probably going to go down the road to the next place, aren't you, right? You've got plenty of choice, and you've got a device in your pocket that can find 10 of the mortgage providers in 5 seconds. So the stakes are really high. So focusing on the design and imagining what that experience is, for me, that's the big part of this.
100%. I definitely do believe you, and that's why I believe they even say high streets are now slowly dying because there's so much options online. That's
Yeah. Well, I had a personal experience recently. I won't name the bank, but I went into my bank to withdraw some money to pay a plumber, and I couldn't find one in central London that actually dispensed cash anymore. They were all digital bars, and I couldn't actually. I think I walked around for about 45 minutes to find somewhere that would let me take cash out of my own account. So yeah, we're in that place where a lot of it's gone online, but it's a real opportunity for brands, right? I mean, I think we're maybe not quite there yet, but at the moment, I think brand loyalty, a lot of that dates back to billboard advertising, in-store experience, like being around town and shopping and all the rest of it. Of course, certain industries that will always be the case, I'm sure, like fashion. But I think increasingly brand loyalty, certainly for things like financial products, travel, it's going to come down to the experience you have online when you're doing your research, like everyone does. Where am I going to go on holiday next year? You can have an amazing experience being advised by an AI on how to build a really cool trip, or you can have a really cruddy website experience that feels like the late 90s. That's going to have a huge implication down the line on brand loyalty and financial results, right? People just won't settle for subpar experiences online anymore. If they do today, I don't know.
I think definitely even to this day, people are moving away from even accepting anything that's not above par.
Yeah, absolutely, right. Consumer expectations rise far faster than enterprises can keep up with at the best of times, and AI definitely offers a way to hit that hard, but it's not a silver bullet, right? There's still huge expectations on the consumer side, but hopefully that's why this is an exciting opportunity, right? The advent of these modern conversational AI platforms can really make a difference there, right? There's even something as simple as there's a massive retailer we're working with globally, a really famous household name. Probably all three of us have used their services from time to time, and we started there with really simple stuff like returns, right? And I mean, go to a post office today, half the people in the queue are returning stuff to some online fashion retailer, right? So people are constantly ordering clothes online, trying them on, returning them. That's a really big deal for how you feel about that brand, right? If it's an awful experience when you try something on and you don't like it, and it's a hassle and it's not easy to print the label, and many people have terrible experiences with that. That's an opportunity to compete as a brand that you didn't have before, right? When you just walked up to the return desk inside the shop, you can really distinguish yourself now. So sometimes even the most mundane everyday use cases, they're now becoming points of competitive differentiation. Like if it gets known that you're the best for that and you're slick and easy and comfy to deal with, I think the data is going to start to emerge very soon that is really going to drive financial results.
Yeah.
And I certainly hope so anyway.
Yeah, 100%. I think that kind of gives insight in itself how quickly the landscape is actually changing. And I know, of course, with so much change comes a lot of noise as well. So I kind of want to talk about the hype versus the reality. So I know as we both definitely know, new vendors seem to kind of pop up every single week. How do you see enterprise trying to navigate these crowded markets?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, my God, it's just crazy. We're in a place, right? I mean, one of our worthy direct competitors who were friends with Cognigy, I mean, they got bought a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago, for $1 billion by NICE in the contact center space. I mean, if that doesn't show you the level of seriousness that the big players are taking the conversational AI world in, nothing will. I mean, look at what Salesforce has done with Agentforce, done to itself. I mean, apparently they're an AI company now. Not satisfied with being the world's preeminent CRM provider, they're apparently an AI company, right? And Agentforce is huge, right? It's everywhere. And ServiceNow paid a huge multiple for MoveWorks not so long ago, right? So you're seeing this convergence of the biggest software companies in the world in every category are either acquiring or partnering and white labeling and OEMing, or just scrambling to position themselves around this sort of area, right? Everybody's an agentic something these days, right? And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, there was some Gartner research just recently where I think, projected spending was it's already at 13-14 billion globally, and it's going to go up to 32 billion in the next 3 years. So no surprise that software's converging on it. And if you're a software company that's in the ascendancy and you're doing really well, why wouldn't you? if you're maybe not as hot as you once were and you're maybe struggling a little bit, this is an opportunity to reposition and rejuvenate your account base, right? With agentic something, AI something, right? So no judgment there. I think I'd also say the other reason behind the hype is that there is, I speak about this a lot, there's a genuine battle going on, which is, if you look at most enterprise companies, they've all got all of these different software platforms. They've probably got a big contact center, whether it's outsourced or not. They've got a big contact center platform, and they're probably experimenting with multiple AI platforms as well, right? That's any big company, right, that we can think of. That's what you find today. There's then competition inside that IT stack for who gets to be at the front. And we're in this fight as well as Boost, right? Which is who gets to be the front door, the concierge, who gets to greet the customer first and understand what they want and figure out what they need. Whoever controls that kind of is going to control everything, right? Because then you would decide which back office systems to ping to extract which information to know more about the customer. So all of a sudden you are accessing really big famous software company platforms essentially just as a knowledge source. You're also then deciding and orchestrating what goes where. So if something even gets anywhere near that contact center platform or a human agent or redirected to a website with a directory or whatever it is. So I don't want to be as crude as to say he who's at the front controls everything, but I guess I'm sort of saying that, which is there's so much energy, so much hype, and so much fierce competition on software companies going to big enterprise companies saying, we've got the answer. If you let us be the controlling element at the front, we'll take care of all of this for you. And we'll drive outcomes, and we'll make metrics tick up that you've never seen tick up before like this. It's a, so there is hyperbole in there. There's people making all kinds of claims. To paraphrase a friend and a partner, he's saying, I think they've assessed in the neighborhood of 600 AI companies this year, of which we're one. 600, and about 70% of them are startups, probably on the West Coast in California, with no customers that have an amazing demo and are just getting going, right? So whilst that's not a particularly credible story right now, some of those companies will succeed and they'll get bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's just going to be more and more of these vendors out there with stories to tell. So there's definitely hype. If you want my opinion on what the difference is, like what really counts, I think at the moment, if I was a buyer, I don't envy you because there's lots of choice and lots of whizzy demos and lots of exciting stuff, and LinkedIn's saturated all the time. The thing I would demand if I was in a buying role is evidence. Show me overwhelming, not one, show me overwhelming evidence of where this AI thing you're offering me is live, at scale, safe, in a large enterprise, blessed by the security teams and actually serving customers. Show me 3 of them, preferably on 2 different continents in 2 different languages. Then let's have a conversation, right? I think, there's, I don't want to sound too judgy here, but it's sort of, there's an ocean of pilots and POCs happening out there all the time. And there's something very good in that. But it's only a very small percentage of them that ever go live, where the business case stacks up and technically is able to satisfy the security and the compliance needs of a major enterprise. And those are the examples worth looking at. Those are the case studies worth following. And only a smaller number of vendors can evidence that today. That there'll definitely be more. People are improving all the time. But I think to cut through the hype, it's just about evidence, right? You can say whatever you want. AI is amazing. Yeah, agreed. No argument with that. But show it me working live now, doing complicated stuff, and really achieving all those goals you're boasting about, right? If it can improve CSAT and it can help companies make money whilst also saving cost and all this amazing stuff, show me, right? Show me 3 references where it can do that. Right, and not just in one country and that sort of thing, and then you quickly get from a giant pile of noise down to a handful of people that can satisfy that type of criteria. So that sounds very strongly worded, I realize, but
I like it.
That's and by the way, we want to be held to that standard as well, right? it's always hard to read reports where it's the majority of AI projects fail. In many cases, that's true. So let's look at where it's actually working, and let's shine a light on that, and let's celebrate that rather than focusing on the 95% of ones that fail all the time because it's a great headline.
Damari, am I the only one that feels sold here?
100%. Adam hasn't even shown us no data, and I already believe him.
Well, that's the problem, right? Yeah, I'll have to follow up with some evidence now.
100%.
Talk, right?
The proof has to be in the pudding.
I'd also just observe, guys, you might have experienced this yourself in your day-to-day. I think where I have great sympathy, and we're not immune to this as well, nobody is, there is a temptation for conversational AI and AI vendors in general to overstate their case a little bit, because the sheer number of competitors and the ferocity of it, right? And, you know, 1 minute you show up and you're competing with Microsoft, and then the next minute you show up and you're competing with 3 vendors you've never even heard of, one of which started last week. That's really tough. So I get it. There is, I think, a general, maybe even a little bit of an arms race of marketing and architecture and messaging, which is, I think companies, when they get a chance to show their stuff and tell their story, they go really, really big. Fantastic. But there is always that temptation to overstate the case a little bit, because you know how many competitive threats are also circling around that opportunity. Not good for the whole industry, probably inevitable. But to try and be sympathetic for a moment and honest, I think there's a bit of that goes on in our industry all the time.
No, I absolutely love that. Staying on the sales side of things, though, how does Boost AI differentiate itself when the competition is intense?
Yeah, I don't want to do too much of a pitch if I've already accidentally done some of it. But thank you for the opportunity to say it. I mean, what's the best way? Maybe if I talk about why I worked there initially, and rather than just go into a product thing straight away. I mean, what I love about Boost, you know, it was this colleague of mine, Nick, who's persuaded me to join, which was easy, as I said, and is an amazing boss, by the way, if he's listening. But what I love about the company is what it stands for in such a noisy marketplace, right? So this is the best way I could differentiate us, right? Tell me if you disagree, please, on this. I think most AI firms out there, for totally understandable reasons, when they get an opportunity in a big customer and they get excited, the temptation is go for the easy stuff, right? Where's the low-hanging fruit? Give me your top 5 reasons why customers are contacting you, your top 5 this, your top 10 that, right? And pick the lower complexity ones of those that you know your guys can nail. And then why wouldn't you pilot that quickly? Why wouldn't you then showcase that and say, look, our platform nails it, fantastic. And then that's going to lead to a sale, right? And it does sometimes. What I love about Boost is, I'm not saying we've never done that, because that would be disingenuous. But that is not our philosophy or our approach to the market, right? So our belief is that's not the ideal way to deploy conversational AI. You're picking at the edges of something, right? Something more important, right? Which is, again, back to your customer. If you really care about customer experience and you really want to drive these more profound outcomes, right? You really want to change some of your business metrics through the use of AI, surely the starting point is all customer inquiries are important, right? Not just the top 5 by volume. All customers matter. Their problems matter. And our starting point as a platform is, well, if we do nothing else with Boost, let's make it a platform that seeks to understand everybody and understand all inquiries of all types, in all languages, in all scenarios, in all channels. Now that sounds, I know, a little bit bombastic, but that really is our starting point, and we will challenge customers on totally understand these are the top 5 reasons why people are ringing your call center. Totally understand why that's a problem. But if you fix them, what happens? You save a bunch of money. Great, fantastic. But are you materially changing the customer satisfaction? No, you're not, right? Because you're disregarding probably a significant part of your customer base. So what we stand for is looking at CX as a discipline, as a transformational journey that you want to go on or you don't, right? I'm just going to assume if you use a platform like Boost, indeed several others as well that are very good, you're going to save some money along the way if that's what you want to do, right? You'll probably decrease the need for the number of agents in your contact center. Not popular, but that's probably going to happen if you want it to, right? There's obvious things, you'll have efficiencies here and improvements there. That's going to happen anyway, right? If you bring AI into your business. But why are you doing it, right? Surely the real goal is we want to increase sales across the board or in these product lines. We have a problem with retention and we want to look after our customers more so they don't leave us, or we want to have such an amazing experience. We pinch people off our competitor down the road that offers a far less slick digital experience. Well, if you want to do that, which I think most sensible leaders in enterprises will always talk about those types of transformations and initiatives. If that's really your goal, then start with the assumption that all customers are valuable, all of their inquiries are valuable, and you need a platform that can handle that, right? And that includes language, time zone, region, channel. Doesn't matter, right? It's all on the menu, or it's not. So that doesn't mean you don't chunk it up into phases and pilots. And I can hear some of my colleagues rolling their eyes a little bit, right? Of course, you break these things down into manageable pieces. But the reason why you'd engage with a company like us really matters to us. So that's how we try and differentiate ourselves. I think if you held the Boost platform up against 2 or 3 other comparable ones, there are technological differences, but not as many as you think. And that's me being really honest. There are worthy opponents out there that do a lot of the same things pretty well. There are some clever bits of secret sauce that Boost has. Maybe if I just give you one example, and then I'll shut up on this topic, is we've always tried to adhere to something we call the hybrid model. And that's back to the very first thing I said about a combination of AI technologies in use, right? So back to the mortgage quote, why wouldn't you in 2025, if you ring your mortgage provider, and let's say you're phoning a phone number, but it's a bot, why would that bot not be chatty, friendly, personable, playful, and make you feel good about ringing, right? As well as not waiting in an awful old queue on an IVR or something. The second it finds out you're seriously thinking about a mortgage, one of the biggest decisions you'll make in your life, and it transitions into that conversation, it's going to have to use different technology to lock that conversation down, more prescribed, more on rails, which is where that sort of older NLU technology, that machine learning driven technology, comes into play. And then if I follow that example through, by the time you get to the end of that conversation, and I might have 2 or 3 other questions while I'm on the phone, why wouldn't you go back to an LLM driven playful? So if there's something a bit special about Boost, it's able to, in real time, per conversation, per topic inside the conversation, switch between these different types of tech. So it almost like switch between different hats and styles that the bot is doing. It can speed up and slow down. It can change its voice or its tone. You can obviously change languages on the fly, no problem at all. So it's that hybridized ability to bring whatever the best stuff there is out there, bring that to bear all at the same time. And then we're offering an enterprise choice of, okay, we're in this use case, we're in this scenario, we're in English, and we're on the phone. How do you want to handle that situation? How do you want that conversation to go down? And there's options there, right? And I think we see our role as a platform is bring those options through having the best of breed technology. But all the discussion then is about that design element of how do you want that conversation to happen? And we'll make it work with the combination of tech and AI tooling that's inside our platform, right? And maybe just a last observation. I mean, we're very proud of our proprietary models and how our platform works, but another phenomenon I'm sure you guys are aware of is increasingly enterprises want to bring their own tech and intermix that with us, right? They say, well, we've been doing some LLM model tuning for 3 years. We've got an Anthropic or a Gemini we've got our own ChatGPT that we've been fine tuning for years. Can we use that in your platform? Yeah, sure. Of course you can, right? So I think that's a glimpse into the future as well, in that like platforms are going to be the wrap around models. And there might, and obviously inside those models often is intellectual property, right? The deep knowledge of that brand's business, product names, lingo that relates only to them, and knowledge of promotions and marketing stuff and all that kind of thing. You can totally understand why enterprises might want to control some of that more and more in future. but they don't have time to build a whole platform to govern and control and orchestrate it, right? And that's where someone like Boost would come in. So I hope that's not too salesy.
Boost.
Nah,
Well, I just wanted to say, if Nick is watching, Nick, it makes sense. My Adam is part of the team.
You're too kind. He'll be laughing at that.
And Adam, yeah, I think that's like a mic drop moment. I think we should have ended on that, but I mean, yeah, we still got more to go.
no. Adam, I was going to ask, do you think we'll end up with like a big three in conversational AI like we did with cloud, or do you think it will still kind of stay fragmented?
Oh, what a great question. I mean, I might dream about there being a big three and we'd be one of them, and wouldn't that be awesome? I think, but no, I mean, recent barometer, right? I mean, I know it's not without controversy. Gartner, the Magic Quadrant out 2-3 weeks ago, first one in a couple of years for conversational AI. Absolutely privileged and thrilled that Boost was in the leader quadrant. There's 4 companies in there. We've mentioned one of them, Cognigy, now Nice. Little company called Google was another one. We were one, and Core was another, right? So, Gartner isn't the law, obviously, but they're a really, really good barometer of quality. It's a really, really difficult process to go through their assessment, and despite some of the comments online you always get when these things are published, and it's the same for I think when any analyst publishes any report or ranking or league table, there's always cynics, and I understand why that is, but can assure you, having been through that process many times, it's extremely rigorous. You may disagree with their criteria and that sort of thing, and that's totally valid. But if you're in that process, they run the ruler over you like nobody's business and check out references all over the world and all sorts of stuff. So we're privileged to be recognized as, I guess, sort of in that club. I think what's interesting, though, to your point, is, there's already a big three in the cloud world, right? And they're already major players in this space, right? Microsoft has Copilot, not to be trifled with, a serious bit of kit, although very different to something like Boost. Obviously Amazon has Bedrock and Lambda, and heavily involved with Anthropic and stuff, and Google has Gemini and Dialogflow and all the rest of it. So you're already seeing even those 3 hyperscalers are hugely important to the AI market, both as providers of models, but are also directly in the conversational AI world. And then everybody, all the people we've already mentioned, everyone from Salesforce and ServiceNow to HubSpot and Workday, and you name a big famous software platform, they're getting into this space through their own product or acquisitions or both. So I think what's true is there'll be massive consolidation. I mean, like I said, if MIT's right, if 95% of Gen AI projects are failing, and my colleague in the industry is right that he's reviewed 600 AI firms this year, and that's not even all of them. I mean, that can't all work out beautifully, right? There's going to be some casualties, there'll be some consolidation, and I don't know what the future of the market is, but I think I feel very fortunate to work for a platform that has a very strong sense of what it is. We're obviously a fraction of the size of some of those other companies I've mentioned, but we're very clear about who we are, and we're very clear about how we want to help customers, and I hope we get it. I hope we're able to continue to do that in a prominent way and be recognized for it as long as possible.
Oh, amazing.
Is that a diplomatic answer to I don't know?
No, it's amazing. No, it's amazing. There's just, I feel like, there's so much complexity, and I feel like Boost AI, you guys give enterprises clarity, which is amazing. And again, just getting clarity from even just speaking with you.
Thank you.
In terms of we hear words like agentic AI, autonomous agents, they can often they can confuse even experienced buyers. So how do you simplify these ideas for clients?
I mean, if I had the antidote to that, I'd probably be a wealthy author or something. To self-deprecate for a second. I mean, it's even on the inside, it's really hard, right? I mean, I remember earlier this year when MCP was first mentioned, Model Context Protocol, as an acronym. I remember one of our senior product guys mentioning it on a call, and I thought, I have no idea what that means. So I quickly Googled it. As okay, it's an Anthropic open source, blah 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 blah. Okay, and now I sort of have got it right. And we're supposed to be the experts, right? So that these things are coming thick and fast all the time. If we just use agentic, let's use that as the example, right? Everybody's favorite, love to hate it word. I think we'll be sick of it in a couple of years. I mean, even that term, right? There's different definitions of it. Even the most famous CEOs, the most famous tech companies in the world don't seem to be able to agree on what it is. I think our stance, interestingly, is I quite like this, is it's a spectrum. It's actually a sliding scale of like the degree of agenticness. I don't know if that's not a word yet, but like how autonomous is this bot going to be in this situation? How able is it to take decisions under guidance and rule sets and this sort of thing? How on rails does an experience need to be versus you're letting the AI just do what it does based on prompts and instructions? So I think sometimes behind those terms anyway, not only are they hard to define, but I'm not sure even if you have a great definition for it, it helps you deploy it, right? Because, okay, now we know what agentic is. Well, what do you want to do with it? Right. And you need to get down to almost a topic, use case, individual scenario level and say, right, are you going to let this LLM just have at it and answer this particular question to the best of its knowledge based on how you prompted it, the knowledge you gave it access to, the instructions? Or are you going to prescribe it absolutely and say, I don't want to get in trouble with my regulator. I have to guarantee that the answer to question 7 is always answer number 7, and it's always worded in the same way, and it's audited. So again, I come back to, so I feel like a stuck record here. It comes back to where I try and probably this is just to hide my lack of knowledge sometimes, is I try and focus on the customer's world, right? What environment are they in? How heavy are the regulations? How hardcore is the security? Well, it's always going to be pretty hardcore. What kind of customers do they have, right? I mean, if I maybe just give one quick example, if you look at the energy industry, I mean, domestic energy, the energy providers we all pay our bills to, there's a whole concept in that industry, as there is in several others, of what's called a vulnerable customer. And I think we can all imagine what that might be. So it's people on prepay meters that we've seen in the news. And there's a whole set of regulations and government guidance and industry guidance on what you can and can't do with one of those customers in a discussion once you've established that they're in that vulnerable category. And it's all very, very ethically upstanding, right? You're not supposed to be trying to cross-sell and upsell them every 5 seconds, and you're treating them with a lot more care and exploring topics with them more carefully, right, to ensure that their status is respected and they're recognized for that. So I think that is such a specific situation to an energy provider that it's more important, I think, to focus on their world and what that's like, and again, what is the right experience for that type of customer. And then I think that will naturally then lead you to say, right, we need this much agentic and that much LLM and this, kind of, you pull all the tools out the toolbox then, and there's people far more talented than me that know what the right mixture and the right prescription is. And I'd also just observe, again, I know it's self-serving because I've told you that one of Boost's big strengths is this hybrid mixture of tools. It's also why I'm inherently distrusting of one-trick ponies on tech. Gen AI is awesome. LLMs are awesome. They are not the tool for every single use case, scenario, conversation, outcome. That can be incredibly dangerous in the wrong situation, right? As with any other piece of technology that's gone before. So I think there's also, amidst all the terms and the jargon, it's understanding that there's no one magic bullet, whatever the right analogy is, right? It just can't go down that way, right? Customers are different, people are different, industries are different. So the more you understand your customers, and most enterprises understand their customers really well. They've got great data. They know where the pinch points are. They know what's wrong. They just maybe haven't had an opportunity like this to change it as much. So that's a really fruitful conversation. What I hope we don't do as a vendor, and I'd like to think that other people don't do this too much, is don't beat people over the head with LLMs or agentic writers. That's the answer. What's the question? That's not the way to go. Right. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's kind of the best way to do it is kind of simplify it. And I think a lot of people like to overcomplicate a lot of these words and this jargon. But I think just kind of understanding what the customer's pain point is and how it can be fixed, not the things that are being used to make it fix. It's how do you get to the end result, and that's the main thing here.
Yeah, and I I could understand if engineers listening to this would groan and go, well, that's because he just doesn't understand the nuance of this and this. And that's also
Maybe.
true. Right? So
I put my hand up as well.
I mean, the thing that comes to mind, the thing that popped into my head when you were talking is I remember that I think the very first session I was in as a Boost employee was part of my onboarding at HQ. And I think the very first person who spoke was our CEO, Jerry. And he did the sort of welcome to Boost, intro, slide deck, exactly what you'd think an onboarding process would start with. And I remember his intro to this day is just like, well, we're here to drive amazing conversations between brands and their customers. That's what it's about, right? Great conversations. That's what it's always been about, right? So the tech has changed and evolved and it's grown. And of course, amazingly talented engineers have to turn that into an enterprise platform that meets all the right standards, and you can orchestrate everything, and the UI is beautiful, and every option you could possibly want to configure it. Of course, that's years of work, years and years of work. I'm not trivializing that, but at its core, why has that platform been built? It's been built to solve one of the simplest things in society, which is making customers feel good about how they interact with stuff they spend money with.
That's amazing. 100%. Simplicity definitely wins for sure. But Adam, it's been a very, very insightful conversation. I really appreciate you kind of taking us on the journey. I just kind of want to finish up by looking ahead. So
Okay.
I kind of want to what does the future of conversational AI look like for you in the next few years?
Gosh, that isn't that the question. I want your answer on this afterwards, by the way. You're not getting away with this. I mean, look, as I'm a passionate historian outside of work, I have a hard time enough figuring out what happened in the past when I've got documents and video footage to help me. So I don't know why I'm the right person to guess what the future of AI and conversational AI is. I might stay away from that a bit. I think the one thing that's really struck me is obviously the capabilities of the AI models, the LLMs that underpin a lot of this are obviously improving amazingly. Look at GPT-5 recently. They're only going to keep improving. There's really exciting areas like reasoning, which is quite different to understanding, right? That's improving rapidly. And as those technological innovations happen, the ability to automate more and more stuff is amazing. I think I can't believe I'm going to quote him, but Sam Altman of OpenAI, he said something not so long ago at a conference that I thought was just amazing, where someone was asking him what the biggest mistake was in the AI industry and what were the biggest mistakes that startups were making. And I thought his answer was genius, where he said, well, look, 95% of startups, he's like, I thought that the way entrepreneurs would approach OpenAI and ChatGPT was they would look at what we'd done and they would recognize that the models get better all the time, GPT-3, 4, 5, whatever, right? So you build a business around the assumption that the tech always gets better. And I think the example he used was an educational AI startup where at the moment it's only capable of advising 6th graders in the US, and 2 years from now it's smart enough to advise 8th graders, and then eventually it's answering PhD questions, right? Okay. And he said, that's what I thought 95% of AI startups would focus on, that kind of business model, that kind of assumption. It's getting better all the time. He's like, what he contended that it's the opposite. And what most startups are doing, which he saw as a chronic error, is they're optimizing only for the now. So it's back to that top 5 problem, right? I'm going to pick the top 5 use cases in one industry, in one language, and I'm going to optimize the hell out of that. And I'm going to have the best one of those you've ever seen, the best GPT model, the best platform, the best everything. I'm going to cover all bases, solve all problems just for that thing. And then what happens? 3 months later, a new model comes out and blows it out of the water. Yeah. And all that effort was for nothing, kind of thing. So that's an interesting problem that the AI industry faces. What is your design philosophy? Are you going to optimize for today? Or are you going to shoot for perhaps that more ambitious evergreen? Let's build something that can grow as the tech evolves. That's a much harder thing to pull off, right? But I think I don't agree with everything he says, but I think he's probably right there, which is there will be a GPT-6 one day, and it'll probably be awesome. And there'll be something new from Anthropic and something new from Google, right? So there's no sign of that slowing down. I think the only thing that could maybe throw a spanner in the works is the environment, right? Let's not even get into the cost of the data centers that underpin these things and don't say please and thank you when you're typing your prompts because it costs thousands of dollars a year, and you're familiar with all of that, right? So I think there's a lingering environmental question behind all of this, which is, can we build the data center infrastructure, and is the grid capacity going to be there long term? But there's obviously amazing people working on that problem. But I think the future is, and I feel very fortunate to be in this position, I don't see many vendors having a lot of success without great partnership strategies, because you need these collections of companies to deliver amazing scale for these enterprise customers, because AI is more difficult than people think it is. So I think the future is just the tech gets better and better. The smart startups have built their platform in such a way that you can always benefit from the latest, greatest tech. There's always upgrades and improvements to be had. It's like every 2 weeks, it feels like at the moment on our side. And then you just hope that those companies like ours are, thankfully, a very pro partner, and understand that if you're trying to pull off these big results in enterprises, you got to team up with people. You can't do it all on your own.
Yeah. No, honestly, amazing. I think I definitely do agree with you in that space as well. I think it's just about kind of keeping up with the times, and I think it's going to consistently develop. And as you said, that every 2 weeks, new things are coming out. And I think it's about the businesses that actually are staying ready and preparing, knowing that new tech and developments are going to be happening, are the ones that are going to stay ready. And I think there's two sides of that. I think businesses will, of course, become much more efficient, but then I also think in terms of how staff and how employees are upskilling to kind of ensure that, because jobs like being a court agent, I think in the next 5 years it might be a thing of the past, and I think it's about kind of ensuring that people who are learning in these spaces are understanding what the skills they need to kind of hone in on that can actually provide the value it will, not today but in 5 years later, for sure. But yeah, but Adam, this has been a fantastic conversation. You covered your journey, the conversation, how conversational AI has evolved, what enterprise should focus on. So for those who are listening, where can they find you and Boost AI?
Well, you've given the address away, which is perfect. So yeah, simply Boost.ai is the best place to find us as a company. We're obviously on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Would be delighted to connect with anyone. I'd also say, if you wouldn't mind as well, don't just think that Boost has a monopoly on good ideas on this. There's, along with your good selves, there's great influencers out there and great voices doing AI the right way. If I could plug one person, I'd say Kane Sims, quite a well-known AI influencer. I'm biased because I love him because he's from my hometown and we get on well, but you'll never meet a more clarity orientated thinker than him. And the kind of no BS, tell it like it is, the style that you're exhibiting today, right? I think we need voices like that in AI right now. And it's the same on the partnership side, right? I think it's easy to be cynical about medium and large consulting firms. Oh, they just care about margin, and they're all, someone's always got something to say about anyone, whether it's McKinsey or Boston or Accenture. But actually what you find in these organizations is they've pivoted wildly, built really big AI practices with some of the true experts in the field, right? And these people know far more about certain aspects of AI than any vendor, including Boost, would ever know, by design, right? So I think the appeal I would make is taking a diverse range of opinions from vendors, partners, consulting organizations, influencers, analysts. No one's got the monopoly on having the right answers on this stuff, and there is a need, I think, to bring in perhaps a bigger group of evidence than you've looked at before, and kind of parse that a bit. I hope that's a good note to end on, right? We'd obviously love to engage from Boost's point of view. We're thrilled to meet any customer or any potential partner, but we don't pretend to know everything, right? Our first instincts is always, who can we collaborate with to make a better outcome.
That's amazing. That's definitely a lovely note to end off. But Adam, honestly, thank you again for your time. Really did appreciate it. And for our audiences tuning in, this is another episode of Navvai Shift, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, guys.